So good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of myself and everyone at the Bard Graduate Center, welcome to the 25th Annual Iris Foundation Awards Luncheon. As you know, after COVID canceled our event in 2020 and then forced us online last year, it is a great pleasure to be here with you live in person. This afternoon, to celebrate Deborah and Philip English, Helen Evans, Anne LaFont, and Barbara Israel, 5 remarkable individuals whose work and generosity have not only had lasting impact on the field of decorative arts, design history, and material culture today, but will no doubt impact the field in the future as well. It is wonderful to see so many new and old friends here this afternoon, and I must tell you, we had to reseat this luncheon 3 times. Thank you all for coming. Your ongoing support for Bard Graduate Center means a great deal to me and is critically important to our students. Because of your attendance at this lunch, we have been able to fund, I would say, between 400 and 500 graduate students, both in our MA and PhD programs. So being here is so critically important to our students. And I particularly want to thank our Board of Trustees, led by Nancy Druckman, who's about to put her lipstick on, and this afternoon's event chair, Deborah Zabel Miller. Thank you. As we begin today, I want to acknowledge the times. There are masks on the table if you wish to use them. I leave it up to all of you to judge your comfort zone. And there are extra masks if you want to take them after the event. Bard Graduate Center has been a great love of mine since 1993. And I have had terrific partners joining me in this endeavor. And thanks to them, BGC has built a long record of accomplishments and has acquired an impressive international reputation. None of this could have been done without two of the people I'm going to now mention. I want to recognize Dr. Leon Botstein, president of Bard College, who believed in this venture from the very beginning and provided an academic home from which to build this institution. So thank you, Leon. We could have never done it without the support of you and the college. I also want to recognize our dean, Dr. Peter Miller, who along with our phenomenal faculty, many of whom are here this afternoon at your tables, are the intellectual cornerstone of the institution, leading the field with an innovative approach to research, as well as a deep commitment to the next generation of scholars and professionals. Thank you, Peter. There are so many individuals throughout BGC and Bard College, too numerous to mention here, but I am grateful for all that they do to make BGC a leading center for research and exhibition of the decorative arts, design history, and material culture. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our wonderful, multi-talented board chair, Nancy Druckman.
Okay, thank you, Susan, and good afternoon to everyone. I am Nancy Druckman, chairman of the Board of Trustees at the Bard Graduate Center, and it is a pleasure and energizing and wonderful to see you all here in person to help us celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Iris Awards. I want to start by extending my warmest thanks to Deborah Miller-Zabel, who is our event chair, as well as our sponsors. And spoiler alert, there are 20 names, and I'm going to read all of them, so hang on, but they really deserve recognition and acknowledgement. Here we go. Jan and Warren Adelson, Patricia and Tom Barry, Michelle Beanie Harkins, Ellie and Edgar Cullman, Susan Cullman, Mike and Lucy Danziger, Suzanne and John Golden, Anna Horta Osorio, Holly Hotchner, Ingleside Investors, Mary Jaharis, Ann Pine and the Macmillan Company, David Mann, Vera Mayer, Barbara Nessum and Jules Demchick, Judy Steinhardt, Bonnie and Tom Strauss, Malcolm Weiner, Dee Dee and Barry Wigmore, Abra Prentice Wilkin, and the Honorable Kemba Wood and Frank E. Richardson. So thank you all very, very much. So this is our 25th. So this is our 25th annual Iris Award lunch. And it's been a great success. I don't know if I'm allowed to say specifically how great a success has been, but it has been. And you know that the funds from this luncheon go to support the scholarship fund at BGC, so that all qualified scholars who aspire to attain a degree at BGC can do that without concerns about their economic circumstances. So thank you, everybody who donated and bought a ticket to the event. And I would like to also thank my fellow board members, and Susan and Peter and Benjamin and Tim. It's been an honor to work with all of you on behalf of this wonderful institution, and for me personally, being engaged with all of you, thinking about, talking about, and working on BGC has been a vital connection to something vibrant and vital and important, and it's been a lifeline for me in a period of 2.5 years where I had a lot of isolation and a lot of disconnection. So now that we're all together, let's celebrate the contributions and accomplishments of Philip and Deborah English, Helen Evans, Anne LaFont, and Barbara Israel. Because of you honorees, our world is a vibrant place. Your work and your accomplishments have been essential in giving support to further research in the decorative arts, design history, and material culture. And we are very, very grateful. So the award presentations will follow, but for the moment, enjoy your lunch, and thank you.
So it is now my pleasure to present the 2022 Iris Award for Outstanding Patron to Deborah and Phil English. Bard Graduate Center is so very lucky to count the Englishes among our friends and supporters, as any organization in their favor can tell you. In addition to being very generous, they are engaged, thoughtful, and strategic. Why don't the two of you come up here? So I'm not alone. As patrons, they are a true team. Deborah, a painter, brings artistic talent and an aesthetic eye to the partnership. She was born in Havre de Grace, Maryland, I don't even know where that is, studied creative writing at Southern Methodist University, and graduated with a degree in painting from the Maryland Institute College of Art. Phil, an entrepreneur and very funny guy, I must tell you, graduated with an MBA from Southern Methodist University. They combine their interests and strengths with their love of the arts and their commitment to their community. This winning formula has had a significant impact on the cultural life in Baltimore and beyond. The Englishes were drawn into the BGC thanks to their daughter, Elizabeth, a professor of art and a designer, who suggested they meet with me to discuss their ideas for an exhibition of their much-loved Majolica. You all may not believe this, but there was a time when I was not particularly interested and knew very little about Majolica.
I think I remember it.
Yeah. However, over the course of numerous conversations with Phil and Deb, and a lot of friendly arm twisting, I've lost both my arms, they convinced me that Majolica was not only worthy of an exhibition, it was worthy of rigorous academic research. I'm afraid enough to fill a 3-volume catalog. They backed up their passion for the material with incredible generosity, providing the seed money to launch a lecture series on Majolica in the name of our dear late friend, Joan Stack Graham, who wrote or co-wrote the first scholarly history of Majolica. Once BGC was committed to the exhibition, they stepped up early to be the leading sponsors of the exhibition. They have been wonderful advocates for the project, helping to attract additional support. And I see some of those supporters around here today, like Sheldon Rice and Ed Flower. So glad you're here. Thanks to Phil and Deb, as well as the many funders who heeded their calls, Majolica Mania broke all fundraising records for any exhibition in BGC's history. Their generosity was not limited to the exhibition. They also understood the importance of BGC's educational mission and supported scholarships, as well as invaluable professional internship opportunities in Baltimore. The English's philanthropic support of the decorative arts goes beyond the Bard Graduate Center. Last year, they announced that they are donating most of their considerable Majolica collection of more than 500 objects, mostly very large, to the Walters Art Museum, our exhibition partner. And again, in a gesture that demonstrates their understanding of nonprofit institutions, they have generously endowed a curatorial position in the area of decorative arts, design, and material culture at the Walters Museum as well. These combined gifts are transformational for the Walters, Baltimore, and the future of Majolica research for years to come. I'm going to now just quote a little bit from Julia Marchiara Alexander, who's the director from Baltimore. She says, "This new position, funded by the Englishes, gives us the ability to further the study of ceramics, like Majolica and other examples of material culture, which expands the types of stories we are able to tell and restores this art to its rightful place in history. We are simply thrilled to have the opportunity to integrate the visionary collection the Englishes have created into the Walters, which stewards one of the most significant collections of ceramics from across the globe and time in the United States. The English's Majolica collection is the largest, most comprehensive, and most significant collection of English and continental European Majolica given to any U.S. institution. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the English's support beyond the decorative arts. They have been generous patrons of and served on the boards of major cultural institutions, including the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and Baltimore Ballet. But Majolica is their true passion. They have developed an extraordinary eye and connoisseurship for the material, and they play a critical role in collecting and preserving knowledge and research about the material. They are active on the board of the Majolica International Society, MIS, and Deborah has been instrumental in the establishment of the Marilyn Cormison Majolica Library, which houses an image database of nearly 16,000 entries featuring Victorian Majolica and related materials. For all that they have done to support the field of decorative arts, it is my pleasure and honor to present the 2022 Iris Award for Outstanding Patron to Deborah and Philip English. Congratulations. You're very welcome, both of you.
Susan, first of all, thank you.
Here's your cracked award.
And
Very pretty.
as we were walking in, Benjamin came to me and said, your award was sitting right on the table and it took a nosedive and it's cracked. And I, and I said, you know, quite frankly, the award is undeserved. But I really appreciate the kind words Susan has expressed, and to have our names associated with the BGC is a real honor, a real one. Also, at this time, my tenure on the advisory board is coming to an end, and I want to thank Nancy Druckman for her leadership during a very difficult time. She did a really outstanding job. And of course, Susan and Peter and Benjamin and my buddy Tim, we have talked about financial challenges a few times and maybe even figured out a way or two to evade, and I will say this with Leon here, evade the noisy and nosy guys from Bard College. One of the things that I think we have been motivated by and went so extensively to participate and make gifts to the Walters was the knowledge that we have learned about material culture, design, and decorative arts from our experience with BGC. We came to understand and appreciate what it is. And our intent and purpose is to spread that knowledge, not only about Majolica and that particular ceramic, but ceramics and decorative arts across the world. So we appreciate your leadership, your friendship, and it's been a real pleasure for both of us.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everyone. It is an honor to introduce Helen Evans of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. When in Tokyo in the 1970s, Helen Evans decided to study Japanese art and architecture. I'm not sure how Japanese art would have looked today, but we can be certain that Byzantine studies would have suffered greatly. For Helen represents, for the most, what we can call the scholar-curator, a rare combination of studious research and the ability to bring that research, these high-end discoveries often written in a way not many of us can understand, to the mass audience, to the museum visitors who are often not well-traveled or possess any keen interest in their subject matter. And in bringing Byzantium to New York, Helen made the often misunderstood, somewhat obscure gilded Byzantines into an empire every museum goer would like to know, or at least feel sympathetic to. Indeed, for her first exhibition at the Met, The Glory of Byzantium from 1997, through the mega blockbuster exhibition with more than 300,000 visitors, Byzantium Faith and Power from 2004, Helen became known amongst her colleagues and peers as possessing this magical skill of narrating very complicated historical scenarios in ways that we can all understand and even more so relate to. My favorite Helen exhibition was Byzantium, Islam and Islam from 2012, a first of its kind exhibition that its focus was change and exchange, or if you will, movement and mobility. In all of these exhibitions, Helen taught us something fundamental about art across time, not over long distances, but rather in one place, Byzantium, weaving together stories of continuity, change, and transition, all embedded in objects, while juxtaposing master narratives versus lived ones, rhetoric versus experience, and change as a form of reality, only to highlight aspects of the Byzantine object, as we museum goers might miss. Helen's landmark exhibitions and the important medieval acquisitions she made in the past decades brought more life to the Met's galleries while enriching the culture of New York City for all of us. In her final major exhibition, Helen returned to her dissertation topic, and as you can guess, it was not about Japanese art, but rather way westward across the Silk Road to the shores of the Black Sea, on Armenian manuscripts that became the focal center of her doctoral work. And indeed, Armenia with an exclamation point was everything Armenian art meeting an exclamation point could have hoped to have become. Here, uniquely, Helen managed to bring together the Armenian community from all across the globe, with more than 80,000 Armenians visiting the exhibition and revering those objects that for us seemed mesmerizing to the eyes, but for the worshippers always deemed holy. Helen's sensitivity to religious communities of art lovers has made the medieval department at the Metropolitan Museum of Art renowned, with stories of groups of nuns brought in after hours to look at art, or monks from St. Catherine in Sinai blessing with incense the exhibition space where holy icons were on view. But for so many of us, Helen was most of all a mentor and a lifelong colleague, whose legacy is as much in her scholarly work as it is in the wide community she supported and encouraged. She took most seriously even graduate students at the start of their careers. And I still remember an encounter with Helen in 2004 at the manuscript room of the Walters Art Museum, of all places, in Baltimore. I was then just a second-year graduate student and an overconfident Israeli, which, as you can guess, is a very dangerous combination. But still, Helen was very patient and very calm and explained to me in very much details and to my fellow friends how Armenian manuscripts work, a lesson that I remember until this very day. And so, on behalf of the global community of medievalists and Byzantinists, and on behalf of the New York City community of art lovers, we thank you, Helen, for everything you have done for us. Please, congratulations on receiving the Iris Award.
I thank you very much for your generous remarks. And it's a great pleasure to be awarded the Iris Award because I began my career at the Met at almost the same time Susan began the Bard Graduate Center. And we, oddly enough, met in St. Petersburg, Russia, in a very long line at the airport, wondering if we would ever get out of the country, and occupied our time discussing our plans. So I have watched the Bard Graduate Center since its foundation become such a thoughtfully creative program. And I'm honored to have you respect me as much as I respect the Bard Graduate Center and its efforts. Gibbon, a villain in my world, declared at the time of the American Revolution that Byzantine art, the art of New Rome, was irrelevant after the 6th century. And that statement was generally accepted until Philippe de Montebello, as director of the Met in 1997, urged me to do a Byzantine exhibition. And the glory of Byzantium, 843 through 1261, so decidedly after the 6th century, covered the eras after the rise of Islam and through the Fourth Crusade's occupation of Constantinople. And the fantastic objects that we had there, some of which you saw on the screen, convinced many that Byzantium was important throughout its history, and that its success set off the work for which I'm being honored today. So I thank you, Philippe. No one does anything on their own, and the list of those who could and should be thanked by me goes far beyond the time I have. But I would definitely want to thank Philippe, and I want to thank Griff Mann, the current head of the medieval department, for when he arrived and enthusiastically supported my last exhibition, Armenia with an exclamation point, because we could not agree on words to follow Armenia. It was the simplest solution. I also want to thank all the people in the medieval department, actually all the people at the Met who either enthusiastically or unpleasantly ultimately more or less helped me get what I wanted, particularly Bill Wixom and Peter Barnett, who were also heads of the department, and all the interns, fellows, volunteers, exhibition catalog authors who worked with me and have gone on to have really important and significant careers and spreading a new way to look at the world. As importantly, of course, are the people the Englishes represent, the donors who support and believe in projects. And there have been many really wonderful donors for me, but most importantly were Mary and Michael Shaharis, who paid for the reinstallation of the Byzantine galleries at the Met, bought many of the most important objects that were added to the collection, and helped fund many of the exhibitions that I had. So without them, I don't think I would have ever been able to do what I am being awarded for today. And I would not have been able to make known the importance of the art and culture of the Empire of the Romans, ruled from New Rome, Constantinople, now Istanbul, that we call Byzantium and are arguing over what to call it at the moment. I'm coming to the end, I was urged to make my remarks include how it would affect the next generation of scholars, and I would wish them the good luck to have a teacher like Thomas Matthews at the Institute of Fine Arts that I studied with, who urged us to ask the first question, why is what I'm reading true? And to prove that it is true. And by doing that in his own work and in urging me to do it, he set me on the path to a dissertation on Armenian art that linked the Christian East and West in previously ignored ways. So I accept the Iris Award with great pride and look forward with great interest to how the next generation will explore the role of Eastern Christianity from both the Orthodox Imperial Center of New Rome, Constantinople, and through other East Christian people like the Armenians, to whom I will always be grateful for providing me with a dissertation topic that has opened doors to significantly reconsidering our worldview. Thank you, and thank you for supporting the Bard Graduate Center.
Anne Lafont's work represents the state of the art for the study of the European entanglement with African material culture from the middle of the 18th to the middle of the 19th century. Her art and race, the African in and between the eye of the enlightened, published in 2019, winner of the Maurice Condé Prize for Research and the Arnold and Vital Bloch Prize, examined the way Africa and blackness and art were metabolized in the European Enlightenment and in its art. In her current work, a taste of which we got in last night's lecture on the making of ornamental Africa, an Enlightenment process, she takes a step further back in time and exposes how now forgotten terms such as Africanly or Negrerie and the work they did before race took over and obscured other aspects of this encounter of Europeans and Africans. An active writer of books, exhibition catalogs, and journal articles, a busy curator, she contributed to the important exhibition, The Black Model from Géricault to Matisse, at the Musée d'Orsay in 2019, and also a journal editor, Anne Lafont, who was born in Paris, educated in Montreal, and trained in Paris at Paris 4 Sorbonne, and then worked as a conseiller scientifique for the history of art at the Institut National d'Histoire de l'Art, and is now directeur d'études at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. We are sure that what will come from her pen in the next years will be the basis for a new art history of the encounter between continents and peoples that has so shaped the fates of modern nations and also so many people. The arrival at this podium of someone who has contributed so much to scholarship is always what makes the faculty choice for the Mid-Career Scholar Award so impressive. What I would like to add now is some context for this year's award. For in this year, we launched with our colleagues at the Brooklyn Museum a new postdoctoral fellowship in the arts of Africa, a part teaching, part research appointment at the BGC, and functionally an assistant curator position at the Brooklyn Museum. And I am pleased to acknowledge the presence here of Anissa Malvoisin, whose own research is on medieval African ceramic trade. Also in this year, we have hired as an associate professor with tenure Drew Thompson, who works on post-colonial Lusophone Africa and the African diaspora. That means from being an object-focused institution that had no regular courses taught on Africa, we became one of the few with both a pre-modern and a modern Africanist. 2 weeks ago, we hosted Bénédicte Savoy for a lecture in residency to talk about how Africa's art got into Europe's museums. As she told us, 70,000 pieces in France alone, of which only 1,000 are on view at any time, and what could be done about this in the future. And next week, we host Shamil Jepi from the University of Cape Town to talk about the libraries, manuscripts, and collections of Timbuktu. To understand fully the power of objects, we cannot look only to the places that we already know well. True citizenship of the world of learning is not a matter of finding everywhere the same thing, but in finding in differences paths to knowing more. For example, our OSUN colleagues at the Weiser Institute in Johannesburg, Sarah Nuttall and Mfo Matsipa, have turned thinking about African mobility and itineracy into a new vision for a redistributed university. Who knows yet what paying attention to African arts, design, and material culture will come to teach us about what we thought we already knew so well. And so, with this award to Anne Lafont, we also mark in 2022 another stage in the ongoing development of the Bard Graduate Center and its aspiration to leave no part of our human, tangible cultural heritage unstudied. And it is now my pleasure to present the 2022 Iris Award for Mid-Career Scholar to Anne Lafont.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Peter. I'm a little bit stressed because I put all my energy on the lecture yesterday night, and I didn't think of having to speak today in front of you, and I didn't prepare anything really. I just took a couple of minutes to think what I could say when I looked at the program and see I had to talk 2 or 3 minutes. So now I will try to do something and to thank very much the Bard Graduate Center for this honor and this award, which means a lot to me. It's huge and actually I think too much. I will not repeat what has been said already. I'm not sure I deserve it, but sometimes I didn't get what I deserved, so this time it's okay. and I will try. It's okay. I must be honest, it's something that says my partner, which is over there very often, so I took it from him, this idea of not deserving sometimes, but sometimes deserving and not being awarded. So I thank you very much, and I will try, and I think it's why I was thinking yesterday night, it's about confidence. What is the benefit of getting an award? I don't know. It makes you very happy the day it comes. And in the end, maybe it says something that you can go a little bit further and be confident to do what you do and share it also with the next generation also. So I'm feeling stronger when I will go out of this beautiful room in a couple of minutes, or I don't know, maybe half an hour, I don't know. So I thank you for that. Confidence is something which I cherish, and I know it helps to work better. So I will try to honor the award for the next, in the future at least, and to thank you for your trust. And maybe I have a last thing I would like to do, because as you can hear, I'm French, and I am grateful to the US and maybe to the Americas in general, because I have been educated so in Canada, and what I've always found here at large is welcoming my questions. And it's not always what I have found, and I have a couple of French friends in the room also, what I have found in France. Even if I don't have the same way to answer the questions, I think in the US, for example, it's much easier to have questions and not to think that they have been already answered or that they don't mean anything. So I'm thankful for that also, and I think this award is also a way to say you can keep to have your own questions and go further in trying to answer them. Thank you very much.
It's my great pleasure, on behalf of Director Susan Weber, the faculty and staff of BGC, to introduce this year's awardee of the Iris Award for Outstanding Dealer in the field of decorative arts. Barbara Israel is recognized as one of the leading authorities in garden ornament and the American Historic Garden. Over 36 years of running her business, she's established a reputation for her knowledgeable and scholarly perspective. And as such, she served as a consultant to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Smithsonian Institution for their collections of 19th century ironwork, and she sold pieces to the Winterthur Museum, the Smithsonian Institution, and the Baltimore Museum of Art, as well as to many important private collectors. Her reputation in the field was firmly established with the publication of her book, Antique Garden Ornament, 2 Centuries of American Taste, covering the period 1740 to 1940. It was the first study to follow the development of American garden design through important garden estates in terms of the ornaments that decorated their grounds. In the process, Barbara showed how the tastemakers and designers gradually developed a distinctively American style, independent of their European forebears. And in her introduction to this volume, she tells how the wellsprings of her career lay in a childhood experience of one particular estate, Blairsden in Peapack, New Jersey. And I quote, "What I'd seen at Blairsden was an early 20th century American landscape, born not of imitation, but of an inspired fusion of inherited tradition and indigenous character." And it's that same spirit of cultivated invention that she's brought to her own work ever since. Her commitment to encouraging a broader public and educational interest in historic garden preservation is also evident in her work as a board member of the Untermyer Garden Conservancy, devoted to preserving historic gardens and their ornament. And it can also be seen in her handbook of a guide to garden ornament, containing advice on design, identification, conservation, and so forth. So it's thus especially appropriate to the intellectual concerns of BGC to honor Barbara's contributions as a dealer and scholar, for the relevance of the garden to material cultural history is enormous, and indeed many of the courses that we teach include aspects of garden history. The designed garden, after all, whether classical or picturesque, is an exceptional art form involving all the senses, not just sight, but hearing, touch, smell, taste, time as well in its changing seasonal aspects. Gardens, historically, could be botanical encyclopedias, theatres, sculpture gardens, models of the larger, less perfect world outside, and therefore to be studied for the natural, moral, and political lessons often incorporated into their design. In all of this, garden sculpture and ornament are fundamental. As Barbara's work demonstrates, their choice of theme and careful placement are fundamental, essential determining factors and can endow a natural space with a density of historical and mythological association. So what are the larger cultural stakes of the garden and its preservation? Today, as we lay waste to our rainforests, as we choke our oceans with plastic, as the air spasms with our chemicals, and so on and so forth, we all, I think, look increasingly for ways to renew our connectedness to the natural world. And in this sense, one small aspect, the garden and its sculptures, the locus aminus and the genius loci, can still offer a mythical path to a connectedness with nature. And so it's within this context, these wider and urgent concerns, that we celebrate Barbara Israel's continuing work. Congratulations.
That was an extraordinary introduction. Thank you so much. I have many people to thank, and certainly Bard and Susan and Nancy and the board. I mean, this is a very illustrious group, and I have to say, I began at the Winter Antique Show years ago in the 1990s and 80s, and we were treated very strangely. The garden ornament dealers, once they showed up at a show, people were sort of like, okay, this is the end of the show, all right, these people are, pretty bad. I actually had a neighbor say to me, get those dirty things out of here. But needless to say, I did not. And you don't really say that to a fourth child who has ambition. And I was like, okay, I want to show them. And I didn't like some of my colleagues talking about 18th century cast iron as if, 18th century decorative cast iron as if it actually existed. It did not. There were certainly, fire plates and that kind of thing, and some kitchen ornaments, but garden ornament began in the early 19th century, and that's all there is to it, cast iron. And the other thing I felt was, this subject is okay for me. I need to get people, in the 20th century and the early 21st, revved up about garden ornament. It was okay for Louis XIV. Good enough for him. It's good enough for me. So in any case, working on the book was an absolute education. It was wonderful. I had great, great help. And I have to thank my 3 employees of 18, 21, and 25 years, Charlie Johnson, Sylvia Falcon, and Eva Schwartz, who are just the greatest. And may it be said, I keep all my inventory at our house in Katona, and you can know very well that I have a very patient husband putting up with that. And thank you to our supporters who are here and who have donated to the wonderful Bard Graduate Center. I can't thank you enough. Fast and last.
So first I want to thank all of you for coming, and for many of you whom I recognize after 2.5 years of not seeing one another, to thank you for this year's support, but also for the support over many years. It's a pleasure, I never thought I would say this, to go to a real gala with people in it. Somehow the pandemic gave us relief from this ritual to which we had gotten all too used to, and for which we may have developed an ill-deserved contempt. But it's a pleasure to sit next to people you don't know and have a conversation. It doesn't happen on the train or in the airport or in a lounge anymore. Everybody is staring at their machine. And if you actually talk to somebody, they think you're deranged or dangerous. And there are many a novel wouldn't exist had it not been for the random conversation between people in conveyances and public spaces, and that doesn't happen anymore. So going to this event is something I found myself looking forward to, and I hope all of you had the same feeling, and the attendance is terrific. We've gotten used to houses which empty seats. Those of us in the performing arts are used to 6 feet, 6 rows, masked people looking like thieves masquerading as audience members. And you can't see people smile with a mask. So it's impossible even really to teach and to converse, much less communicate across long spaces. So it's a time to celebrate, and I want to thank all of you for coming and for your support. I also want to thank Susan Weber, who deserves more than a round of applause for the unbelievable achievement in a very short period of time in creating a place not only of exhibitions, but of great scholarship and superb teaching. So I want to say congratulations to Susan. It had been Susan's ambition from the beginning to really redefine, reinvent a field. There's always a fine balance between institutions that are devoted to one task and the devotion of that task integrated in a complex museum where the specialization is surrounded by things that are not similar. So a separate institution for the decorative arts and material culture. So it depends on bringing intellectual talent and scholarly talent to it. And I want to pay tribute to Peter Miller and to his colleagues, but particularly to Peter, for the broad historical and non-trivial interdisciplinarity of how one thinks about the material culture and objects and the study of the past, particularly through the lens, so to speak, of the environment that we create and that we inherit. So I want to pay tribute to the faculty and to the Dean of the Graduate School. And if we have good faculty and we're well run, we'll have good students, and I think all of you, many of you have contributed to the scholarship programs, and as you know, to be a graduate student in the United States, you need to be subsidized, and so it is, it's important to remember that we have terrific students and fantastic alumni who've gone on to do important and significant things. And I want to congratulate all the award winners. I'm not sure that what's good enough for Louis XIV is good enough for me. I think actually quite the opposite. It sounds right, but I would give it a little bit more thought. It's a great quip. And I had the pleasure sitting next to our award winner for mid-career, and I have to say that it is a terrific breath of fresh air to think about a field in an entirely new way with new material. So I want to congratulate the Bard Graduate Center in the parallel field of music. This is now opening up the integration and the conflict and the synthesis between European imperial powers and the rest of the world in exporting their cultural or dealing with a different culture that they encounter as colonial and imperial powers. And I want to say to Dr. Evans that one thing that her exhibits have always taught me is of all descriptive titles, the word Byzantine has a function in the English language to which you are no doubt acquainted, right? And some people think it's a pejorative. I actually think it's a compliment. The Byzantine keeps us awake, if you think about the opposite of the Byzantine. So I want to say that the exhibitions gave the word, as we commonly use it, a greater texture. So I used to call something Byzantine, you know. And when I see the object that is from Byzantium, I think it might be Byzantine, but it's probably not so terrible that it's Byzantine. But I want to compliment you for all the work that you've done. And to, I would say to the great patronage that you've done to Baltimore, and also being a Bard parent, which I can't fail to say, and I hope a satisfied one. I want to assure you that the quip about the noise between Bard and the Bard Graduate Center, I assure you is music. And, you know, there's always an inherent tension between a unit and a larger institution, and universities are, you know, between a university and a medical school, a university and a law school. Though, for those who don't know, the medical school costs money and the law school makes money, and the university in the middle needs money. So it's a conflict always. But I think this has been a fantastic cooperative relationship, and we're very proud, and I think Peter would agree that we enjoy great relations, and it's not only easy for us to be accused of looking in a Byzantine manner toward the operations and the finances, but it's also equally true that smaller units can look at the parent, so to speak, with a way of sort of using them as a shield to explain things that they otherwise would have to explain without the parental excuse. So it's a little bit like that, but we're all part of a family, and a family is never totally a smooth ride for any of its participants. But I want to congratulate you for all that you've done for the arts and for Baltimore, where we have a high school early college, and have had one of the 8 we have in the country, and we're very proud of. And it's a terrific city with a terrific history of philanthropy, of which you are a major part, and I want to congratulate you for what you've done for the city. It has been sort of a habit for me to say a long goodbye to you. It's not going to be too long, by saying a few sort of remarks about where we are, both as an institution and what we do, how it fits into the current political climate. I want to say the most important thing to think about is the return from the pandemic. What have we learned, particularly as it relates to the study of material culture and the graduate study of the field. The first thing are general comments, the things that we see from our perspective, which is we have 8 high schools, so we have thousands of young people who have not been in school for 2.5 years, and we've communicated with them online. In New Orleans, in Washington, in Baltimore, in Cleveland, in New York City, and in Newark. So what I have to say is not simply from the narrow vantage point of a liberal arts campus like Williams, that is unto itself, so to speak, and also from trying to continue an educational program with 300 incarcerated prisoners here in New York State. So the first is that the end of the pandemic revealed some deficit in how people interact in a group. You wouldn't have thought that that would be a problem, but the isolation has taken its toll. You've read about concerns about mental health of young people, and that is all true, and special kinds of anxieties and difficulties in actually negotiating, being in a group, in a classroom, in a dormitory room. It's something I don't think we anticipated. The second is that the complete bankruptcy of virtual communication. Before the pandemic, there was a kind of, I would call, technological euphoria. Actually, why go to a museum? You can see it on the screen. Why have a teacher go online? And what people, particularly on Wall Street, loved is it was cheaper. And in fact, you could probably deliver a university product with a profit, and you could go into business in a kind of technological replacement for the human interaction. So teachers and classrooms were the moral equivalent of horse and buggy transportation. This turns out to be a nonsense. Technology is very useful, and helps at the margins, but nothing will replace real teaching, real communication, both for the teacher and the student, but for the student among themselves. That the virtual platform is probably a good thing for those of you who have a relationship with somebody you can't see. Your children, your parents, people you already know, that's fine. But you can't get to know anybody virtually, and you can't really have a conversation with 12 people with those little photographs, right? Even if one becomes big when they speak, because the most interesting thing about when someone speaks is to look at the people who are supposedly listening. That's what's interesting. When I look at an opera, I'm not looking at the person who's dying on stage. I'm looking at the people around the person who's dying to see whether the expression of dying operatically has any impact on them. So you don't really look always at a single object. And these virtual screens are really not a surrogate for human contact. We see a deficit in reading, just reading, at all levels. So the isolation is not only disfigures any sense of community, but it had some impact. The amount of time people spent, I don't really know why. I'm not a social psychologist. I don't understand why this is the fact. But the ability in lower grades, particularly, to concentrate and read and retain. You know, we used to think nothing of assigning a Middlemarch or not that big a book, but Madame Bovary or something like that, or War and Peace to a student. It is daunting. It's daunting to get through it and to remember it. And it cuts across social class, region. And we have to think about how one deals with reading. And one of the advantages of the old book format is that it's not on a screen and actually can be carried and possessed, is an object that has a different personal relationship. You can put it under your bed. Einhard describes Charlemagne trying to become literate. And his big idea was to put an alphabetical tablet under his pillow. It didn't work, but it gives an idea that something you can carry with you and write in and sort of possess. A book is. But somehow we have to address the issue of reading, and with that, the issue of concentration and memory. So, and the isolation, I think, has had a very deleterious effect on the way we think about our political life, which we're slowly getting around, and I was pleased to share relief at the French election without saying that the result was totally terrific, but it was definitely the lesser of two evils. And so that was an unexpected piece of good news. I want to close on 2 points, 3 points really, about the significance for the study of material culture. So we live, and it was said from this podium earlier that, I think by Dr. Evans, that being taught by someone who told you that your job is to show and figure out what is true and what is the evidentiary base for truth. We live in a time where that is no longer a common ground. And that is not a common ground. One cannot tell people, no matter how one tries, by whatever reasoned argument and evidence, that the probability of safety against coronavirus, for example, being vaccinated or unvaccinated, is a differential which argues for the vaccine. No amount of evidence and science will convince somebody who psychologically or ideologically is not prepared to hear it. There are millions of people in this country who will not respect or accept the idea that someone won an election. And they have elaborate conspiracy theories about why. 80% of the Russian population believes what is being told on the media by Putin, that this is a defense of Russia against the aggression of the West, with Nazi implications. This whole argument, it may be preposterous to those of us who look at CNN and say that is the truth, right? But what they see is not what we see, and they don't think what we're seeing is the truth at all. If you were to spend 1 hour watching Fox News, you would discover that none of the conversation, none of the discussion that we must see or think about is seen by them. None of the lying by elected officials is visible to them. Nothing Kevin McCarthy said or anybody else said is known to them. In fact, there's stuff about immigration, and you look at it with horror, and it sounds all real, and it has all the visual attributes of truthfulness. Commentators, experts, professors, footnotes, real or imagined. There is no agreement of how we might agree to be convinced of something to be true. So what you were taught, or I was taught in graduate school, would be the premise of I believe something, you believe something, and I show you the evidence, and you say, you know, you're right, I was wrong, or the other way around, right? I always loved the sign over a laboratory in a science program is we said, another beautiful hypothesis destroyed by an ugly fact. So the things you want to believe to be true, you would like to think can be unseated. Or you can agree to be skeptical. You can agree to disagree about something, but we understand the limits of that disagreement. So this has become worse because of artificial intelligence. You know, the old Milan Kundera describes, destroying a bust on a building and replacing it. And the Soviets were terrific at erasing people from photographs and replacing people. And so the Photoshop, before even Photoshop, disfiguring what seemed to be a record of what really happened, of the truth. That disfigurement, the capacity to do that, has been exponentially increased. The ability through artificial intelligence to imitate voice, to imitate what we would call documentation, is so beyond our imagination that we face a time in which evidence itself will be contested and will be almost impossible to disaggregate from how it came to be. All those things in murder mysteries, that was from that primitive technology of faking tapes or forgeries, the great history of forgeries, that we are unprepared for the ability through artificial intelligence to reinvent the past or the facts. Comes to material culture. This institution and what its faculty and students do, and what all of you do as a career, either as collectors or as scholars, is teach how to see with real objects, not screens, to see the detail, the granular detail of what something is, not only for its authenticity, but what's in it. Whether it's a chair, whether it's a table, whether it's a piece of clothing, whether it's a piece of architecture. The other is that the material object bears witness in a way which is hard to falsify. I'll end with a personal example. Many of you may have read in the Times that a Dutch watch was found that had been made by a Dutch watchmaker and given a Jewish watchmaker and given to his brother. And when the brother was taken away with the Dutch Jews, a Nazi officer must have taken the watch and in some event lost it, and it was found. And it was restored and returned to the descendant of the original watchmaker. Now, I happen to be a collector of 19th century horological pieces, that is to say, unusual things in horology. And I was in Vienna, and I was in a rehearsal, taking a break from rehearsal, went for a walk, and visited a dealer with a shop on the street. And I've known him for years, and I come in, and we chat, and he says, you might be able to help me with something. I bought something from an old lady, and I can't actually figure out what it is. Could you help me? And I said, sure. So he brings out a watch. You can see from the watch that it's from about 1920. And it's made by a famous Swiss manufacturer, Ulysse Nardin, because you can open the inside, and it has a serial number and a mark from Ulysse Nardin in it. But the dial doesn't say Ulysse Nardin. The dial is a kind of guilloche dial, and it has the name of a name which this dealer didn't recognize. I recognize that this is the name of the Tiffany of Warsaw before 1939. So Tiffany commissioned, as all retailers, big retailers in the United States, from Swiss manufacturers, watches with a dial with the retailer's name, Tiffany on it, Shreve, Crump, and Lowe, things like that, in all over the United States and in South America too. So this was the leading jeweler of Warsaw, which was owned by a Jewish family, ordering a bunch of watches from Ulyss Nardin. In addition, when you opened the watch, inside was an inscription with a date, 1925, and it's the 50th anniversary, birthday anniversary, of and signatures of family and friends around this, and it's a dedication to someone's 50th birthday. I look at it, and I recognize the name, which is one of the leading commercial figures of the Jewish community of Warsaw, who was also the president of the Jewish community organization of the city of Warsaw, which in 1939, 1925, when this watch was given to him, numbered over 300,000 people, of which fewer than 30,000 survived in 1945. So I'm looking at this watch, which was a birthday present to this man on his 50th birthday in 1925, and I'm looking at it in 2019, right, in a Viennese antique store. And I asked the question, why am I holding it? The point of material objects as bearing witness is it bears witness to a story, tells a story, and that story is probably, so all of this family perished. There are no survivors. They all died in the ghetto, where my uncles, two uncles and my grandparents were, but also in concentration camps when the ghetto was liquidated in 1943. So there are no survivors. So it wasn't sold. So I asked him, who sold it to you? A very nice lady from Vienna, whose father was probably an officer, either in the Wehrmacht or in one of the camps, and took it off, either was given to him as a bribe or he took it off a living or dead body and brought it home with him and put it in a safe and passed away. And then they opened the safe inside. Who needs a pocket watch anyway? And they sold it. I bought the watch. I bought the watch for one reason, to give it to my own children, as an example of how objects have a recalcitrant capacity to bear witness to a past. And that's something we need at a time where we cannot agree on other grounds, verbal, written. You can manufacture evidence. You can't manufacture this. They have a kind of resistance to deceit, which is why training people to see and to recognize what's authentic and what is true through the objects with which we live is an indispensable thing for our post-pandemic world. So, thank you very much for coming, and have a very nice summer.